So change is again connected with life force. And so we get into this cyclical move in which change, life force is connected to change, connected to power, connected again to life force. So instead of the linear time of Newton and the scientific revolution, which starts at the Big Bang, and some might even say before the Big Bang, even though it's nonsense, and goes in a straight line until the complete disintegration of, until the last star switches off. Is there still time after that moment? At some point, the last star in the universe will cool off and stop emitting light or energy, and there will be nothing, dark and cold. Is there still time after that? So instead of this linear time of the scientific model, Nietzsche offers a circular time, a time which suggests that time has to be understood as the eternal return. Eternal return of what? Eternal return of representation, repetition. Yeah. So it's not the image that matters. Is that there is another one that comes right after it. Yeah. So it's not so much what one hashtag is saying on this wall. It's the fact that it is repeated. It's repeated with some modifications. Why? Because it's a fractal. Yeah? It's the same thing that keeps being repeated. Not exactly the same thing. It's slightly different in shape, in form, in meaning, but it is also the same thing. Yeah? So the eternal return is also the fractal movement. Yeah? How Nietzsche could figure that out so early? Well, partly because of the way he writes. Partly because he is a philosopher and a poet, you know. So it could be that actually that's why clarity might be a hindrance rather than clarity might prevent you from seeing things, because this notion of the eternal return is really not clear. It is kind of unintuitive. Where are we? Okay, two things I want to say. First, I want to do the next session on the rest of this text. Okay? So that means that you will read it again, all of it, and we will, because the second part is much more, I think, more kind of interesting and complicated. But before we finish, I have to show you one paragraph from another one of Nietzsche's texts, and that is from Zarathustra. And I will. These are much less poetic translations. This is the Cambridge, but it's they're very accurate. And so.
Would you recommend it to Cambridge if we're reading it in person?
You know, you have to find what works for you. It's kind of nice to have both. When Kaufmann translated Nietzsche after the Second World War, he wanted to address the prejudice against Nietzsche as the harbinger of Nazism, and he wanted to show him as a humanist, and the translation is very poetic, very seductive. So it's a kind of, you know, it's more complicated. Oh yes, this is it. So okay. Now, by the way, as we read it, you will see that it's not dissimilar from a little bit from the Austerlitz that we read in the beginning. So let's start from here. Can you read to us? This is from Thus Spoke Zarathustra, the infuriating book by Nietzsche that could be probably 1/3 of its current length. But anyway, it's a great book nevertheless. It's a flawed masterpiece. Let's read the highlighted text here. Who would like to read to us this usually? Okay.
Must not whatever can already have passed this way before? Must not whatever can happen already have happened, been done, passed by before? And if everything has already been here before, what do you think of this moment? Die?
Dwarf.
Dwarf. Moses gave way to not already have been here, and are not all things family and not gathered in such a way that this moment draws after it all things to come. Therefore, itself as well, for whatever comes from, even in this long line outward, must run it once more. And this slow spider that creeps in the moonlight, and this moonlight itself, and I and you in this way, whispering together, whispering of internal things, must not all of us have been here before, and return and run in that other line outward for us in this long even line, must we not return eternally? Thus I spoke softer and softer, for I was afraid of my own thought and secret thoughts. Then suddenly I heard the dog both nearby.
Good. Just excellent. Thank you very much. I want to hear again just this section here and this slow spider that creeps in the moonlight. Simona, can you read this to us?
And this slow spider that creeps in the moonlight, and this moonlight itself, and I and you in the gateway whispering together, whispering of eternal things. Must not all of us have been here before?
Great. So, on one hand, you might say, well, maybe he just talks about a deja vu. Yeah, and perhaps deja vu is a kind of, is there? But what Nietzsche is saying, and that's why, is it possible to say it in any other way? Is it possible to say it simply, logically, clearly, rationally? Well, not really, because eternal return is a step out of this linear, clear, and rational notion of time. Yeah? For Nietzsche, what we need to be tuned into is repetition. Repetition of what? What is being repeated? What is being repeated is repetition itself. So it's not the repetition of the same. It's not that we keep doing the same thing over and over again. We keep repeating repetition or representation. Yeah? And what does it mean? Well, we represent all the time when we speak to each other, when we, to think is to represent. To have thoughts of anything in the world is to have a representation of it. Yeah? Now, and do we have only one? They keep coming. Yeah? So while lots of philosophers were trying to explain how representation operates, no one seems to be able to explain how it repeats. And it seems that repetition, in that sense, comes before representation. So maybe before there is anything, there has to be repetition. It's a little bit like this confusing thing that Derrida is saying. He says, before there is anything, there is a trace. But of course, you need to have something to leave a trace. But no, the trace comes before the something. First, you have a trace. Then you have the something. Yeah. So we often find ourselves dealing with what representation means. Fine, we can spend a long time discussing the meaning or the content or the politics of representation. Nietzsche is saying the question is not what it means, but how it repeats. Once you get that, once you get it, actually, the most interesting thing about representation is that it's never singular, but it's always part of a chain. So the representation then is a fractal. So we don't need to look for a fractal. It's not going to say that, okay, well, I'm going to make my work fractal. I'm going to make my work about fractals. It's probably the worst sentence you can utter. Because you cannot make your work about fractals. It's not going to be a fractal if it is about fractals. Yeah? What you can do is just to turn it sideways, like this. So instead of seeing the representation, what we see is the repetition. And I want to say that I think, going back to what you said earlier, Simona, about your practice, but also that I think is basically what does it mean to be a contemporary artist. If you look into any kind of, all the work done here in St. Louis Martins, I think, secretly, that is the logic it is working on. This is the gay science of art. This is its own logic of sense. This is its libidinal economy. It's this shift from representing X to finding out how the eternal return of representation works. Yeah, and whatever that might mean. So far we got from the divine time of the instant revelation. St. Paul arises and he is now a changed person. Yeah, he is now a saint, and it just happens all at once, complete reformatting of the hard disk. From this instant time, we move to the linear time of the Enlightenment, that is universal, measurable, clocky, tick-tack-tock. You can repeat the same experiment anywhere in the world because everything uses exactly the same chronometer. We moved from that to Nietzsche, where this linear time is reimagined as repetition. Repetition we start to investigate how repetition works. So here we're going to stop, and next week, I think, from Nietzsche we move to Einstein, and then we see how it all takes shape in the 20th century. Okay, now I think you really want to work with me. Sasha, we're going to look at your page.
Sorry.
What?